and welcome to Interfaith Connections. I am your host, Jackie Fuller, and thank you so much for joining us for the first time on our YouTube channel. Now, the young lady you see on the other end is Vicki Garlock. She is the founder of Faith Seeker Kids, and she provides resources for families, educators, and churches that want to teach their congregations or their students about religious literacy. And I am so happy to have her on today's program. Thank you so much, Vicki, for joining us.
Thank you, Jackie. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Great, great. So can you share with our audience some background information about yourself?
Yeah. So initially, I was actually trained in psychology. I got a Ph.D. With dual specialties in neuroscience and child development. And so I was a psychology professor for over a decade. And then in 2008, when my two kids were much younger, I took a job at Jubilee Community Church here in Asheville, North Carolina. And my official title is Nurture Coordinator and Curriculum Specialist, which is a fancy way of saying that I ran their Sunday school program, and I was also asked to write curriculum for them. And a few years after doing that, I realized that there might be some people who would be interested in some of the resources that we were creating. And so I founded Faith Seeker Kids. And as you pointed out, the mission, the goal of Faith Seeker Kids is to provide families and educators and churches with the tools they need to teach about the other faiths, the other faith traditions from around the world. And the ages I mostly work with are age 3 and 4 up through 8th grade. But I've heard that some of our materials have been used with high schoolers and even adults.
So why do you think it's important for people to have an understanding of the world's belief systems?
Yeah, well, I think we're seeing a couple of things happen right now. You know, on the one hand, what we're seeing is that cross-faith interactions are happening more and more. Even in small towns in the US and Western Europe, people meet people from other faith traditions all the time, in the supermarket, at schools, at parks. And we also know that a lot of young people are marrying someone from another faith tradition. So interfaith marriage is also on the rise. So that's what's happening on the one hand. On the other hand, we continue to see really tragic events happening in the name of religion. So just within the past year or two, we've had massacres at Islamic mosques, we've had vandalism of Jewish synagogues, massacres at Black Christian churches. So somehow we need to figure out a way to navigate this. And I think those two things are related, right? So as cross-faith interactions go up, for some people that's great, and for other people that promotes a lot of fear. So what we're trying to do is start with kids who really don't have a very hard time learning this stuff, and really try to change that dynamic that's happening in our culture right now.
Have you noticed in your work if it's easier to work with young people in regards to teaching them about the world's religions, or do you get resistance from that? Maybe it's because of maybe sometimes their parents or whoever's in their household doesn't agree with people teaching about different faith traditions, because in some traditions it's like my way. I like to say my way or the highway. That's how I describe it. But I know there could be challenges at times where people want to say, hey, I'm not comfortable with you teaching my child A, B, C, or D. So any kind of like resistance or?
Well, I do think that a lot of times I don't see that resistance because it's behind the scenes, right? If people have those views, they tend not to be interested in my products. They tend not to come to our church for our Sunday school program. So I'm not sure I see all the resistance, but from my perspective, this is so easy to do with kids, right? So kids really understand that there are certain human values that are important, right? Being respectful, being honest, living in peace with one another, living in harmony with the earth, connecting to the sacred. And so when we sort of step back and look at the world's faith traditions from that perspective, it's very easy to see what they have in common. And so kids, we also teach through story. So kids are very happy to learn stories from any number of traditions. And I think that the truth of the matter is we tend to find the parents and the caregivers and the educators that are interested in providing these opportunities for their children. The kids are no problem at all. The kids are the easy part.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking about that too, particularly as children enter their adolescent years, and they're exploring and they're also questioning, and they probably will be seeking like resources. How can I learn about a particular faith? Well, let's say, for example, we'll use Christianity. Like, I'm around Christians all the time. I go to church all the time. I'm in this environment going to mass or what have you, and I don't get that exposure beyond that. So this would be kind of like a gateway for them to at least, I guess, get an introduction into the world's religions without having to take college classes, you know?
Exactly. So one of the things that people ask me a lot of times is, won't kids be confused, right? So there's not a lot of research out there right now, but the anecdotal evidence actually suggests that when people learn about a variety of faith traditions, if they have one of their own, it actually strengthens their own faith tradition for them. Okay. By the same token, when people say, don't kids get confused, gosh, the notion of God and the sacred is confusing. And so what we're trying to do is provide kids with just the language, a little bit of knowledge, to try to access that which is sacred. At their best, religions help us be our best. And so why wouldn't we want kids to have as many opportunities as possible to get in touch with that part of themselves?
Right. So I will actually look, like, for example, with your first publication I'm looking at here, we all have sacred spaces. Can you take me and our audience, like, opening this resource? What shall we expect when we open it?
Yeah. So this is our first kids book. It's geared for kids age 4 to 10. And it starts out with just a general introduction about how we're all different. We're physically different, but we also have different ideas about how the world works. And then it takes the reader through 7 different traditions: indigenous sites, Hindu mandirs, Buddhist temples, Christian churches, Jewish synagogues, Islamic mosques, and Sikh gurdwaras. And it spends a little bit of time talking about the way the outside of their worship spaces look. And then it talks a little bit about what you would expect to see on the inside. And some of it, of course, is about the differences, because in many ways, an Islamic mosque and an indigenous site are different. But it also talks about some of the interesting similarities that you'll see. For example, in the Christian tradition and the Buddhist tradition, there's a certain focus among some practitioners with relics. So not only do big Christian churches have relics, but so do Buddhist stupas. So there's some interesting connections. Also, you might think that Hinduism and Islamic mosques wouldn't have anything in common, but in both of those sacred spaces, you take off your shoes, right? And in a lot of sacred spaces, like Islamic mosques and Sikh gurdwaras, people cover their heads. So we're trying to give both a sense of the similarities and a sense of the differences, and also some of the range of what you see. So for example, if I asked you to describe a Buddhist temple, it's not very easy to do, because they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes and colors, and outside is different and inside is different. And so part of it is just to let kids get a sense of, and adults too, the range of the sacred spaces that are out there in the world, and that have been out there in the world for thousands and thousands of years. So it's been fun, because the early reviews have been really good. We just got a 5-star review from Readers Favorites, which is a professional review organization. So So we have a little silver seal on our cover now, so we're excited about that. So
yeah, because it sounds, I like how you started about the fact you mentioned that we have physical differences, because in a lot of spiritual spaces they like to say we're all the same, and it's like, no, not exactly, but we know what you're trying to say. And I like that you mentioned that. And then the book itself sounds like it's a tour guide, in the sense of like you being able to check out these different places, even though you can't physically be there in person to check it out. So I like that component of it, as you were describing it, because I think that can like really be helpful. Do you see possible challenges in having this type of like education in public schools? Because you start talking about separation of church and state, but could it be seen as maybe learning about world cultures, maybe something in that realm, it could be promoted that way, versus people thinking, oh, it's going to be a separation of church and state issue because she's teaching about religions, and that might not necessarily be the case if you're doing it from an intercultural perspective.
Right. So I'm not a freedom of speech scholar, but
Okay.
but it is actually constitutional for teachers to teach about the world religions in schools. What separation of church and state really refers to is not promoting any one single religion over
Okay.
the others.
Gotcha.
So just to start with, this book would be allowed in public schools. However, it is also true that teachers get very nervous because parents get upset, and nowadays they can snap a photo and put it on Facebook, put it on other social media platforms, and create a huge controversy in a very short amount of time. And as you know, it can be very difficult to have a detailed discussion about anything on social media platforms. And so teachers get really worried that if they try to do anything, it's going to sort of blow up in their faces. And so we're really promoting this book as a solid way to teach across the faith traditions it clearly does not promote one religious tradition over another. So we're hoping that schools, school libraries, and public libraries will adopt this book, buy this book, and make it available to whomever might be interested in it. So we're hoping that will be a small step in the right direction.
Awesome. Now take us to your next book, Interfaith Made Easy, a Christian education curriculum for kids.
Yeah, so, when I was at Jubilee Church, and I'm speaking in past tense, I'm actually still there, but because of COVID-19, we've been closed since mid-March. And so I've actually been laid off for the moment, which is giving me a lot of extra time to write. But at Jubilee Church, I developed hundreds and hundreds of lesson plans, right? So using stories from across the faith traditions and developing crafts and activities. And so that's what I had. And so that's what it made sense for me to start with. So the first unit that was published, so Interfaith Easy is my registered trademark. And the first unit is the peace unit. So it focuses on peace stories from across the traditions. And each lesson plan has at least one craft and at least one activity. And we have 4 volumes: preschool, kindergarten, lower elementary, upper elementary, and middle school. And so we started by marketing that to progressive type Christian churches who might be interested in adding a little bit of information about other traditions. So for now it's marketed as a Christian curriculum to progressive type Christian churches.
Cool.
And the last I heard, it was being used in 7 different denominations.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think resources like this, it's very helpful because it gives parents, teachers, and even, like I said, clergy or even community leaders, something they can use, that they can work with people to help them, or just help, just be a resource for them to understand how they can get individuals to learn about the different faith traditions, kind of like maybe within the comfort of like their environment, and just be able to kind of ask questions and things of that nature that maybe people wouldn't ask in a kind of like, you know, everyday type situation. They'll have the opportunity to just say, hey, you know, I can use this, or I can go to my pastor to ask them about this particular faith and how it, you know, what's the, you know, interconnections with, you know, similarities with Christianity. Because I think that's sometimes like a big concern is, will the stuff I learn, am I learning it properly, correctly? Is this the right type of information that I'm getting about this particular faith? So I think this is like a good resource, particularly for probably like people in the Christian community to really tap into, to use.
Yeah, thank you. Well, there's a whole bunch of interesting things you said in there. So the first thing is there's a reason why I call it Interfaith Made Easy, right?
Yeah.
Because these lesson plans are intended to be used by Sunday school teachers without a lot of preparation.
Oh,
So
good.
the idea is that the teachers or families, caregivers learn along with the kids, right? So it doesn't require a lot of advanced training. And we really do it at a kid level. So you don't have to know the ins and outs of the belief system. You just have to be able to sort of read a story and be really open-minded and really open-hearted, because we ask the kids a lot of different questions. What did you think about this story? You know, did this character act in a peaceful way or a non-peaceful way? And they are open-ended questions. Some of them are content-based, right? So there's technically a right answer based on what happened in the story, but a lot of them are open-ended questions. And so what we really need to find are you know, parents and educators who are willing to let kids explore and who are willing to explore along with the kids.
Right.
And so it really is intended to be very easy for people to do. And in fact, I think I said earlier, yeah, it's in a safe environment. And so I've had people adapt the middle school lesson plans to adults. And I've had a number of adults at Jubilee Church say, I wish I were in the Sunday school program. I wish I were young enough to do your lesson plans, which is kind of sweet. So, yeah.
It's my next question, because that's something I even thought about doing in my downtime from the program. I would like to be able to get in the community in some capacity to do more education around the world's religions. Now, I have pub theology that I do, and that's virtual now too. I don't do teaching in that. I'm more kind of like the facilitator. Don't have to be a referee, but I'm kind of like that person that guides like people from different traditions when they're talking as we're answering questions. But I would like to be able to start setting up sessions where people can probably do something similar to what you're doing, that could come in and learn about those different traditions. I think that's really, really, I feel it's necessary. When you talk about community, I'm like, this is how you understand your community. You need to know the people and the cultural and religious practices of your community to really have a strong, vibrant, and safe community. I think that's really important from that perspective. And another thing is, I'm thinking of your the name of your business, Seeker, because there's so many young people from, I think always college students, when, you know, going through the whole coming of age period during that time in your youth, just have like a really core, just group of people in that time period of their lives where they are maybe seeking something outside of what they've been exposed to. Can you just share your opinion on that? I'm just curious, like,
Oh, yeah.
in your work in particular, like, has that ever come up in, you know, in your work about, you know, it's like, oh, I grew up in a Protestant church or a Catholic church, but I'm curious to learn about, like you said, I notice Christians tend to gravitate to Buddhism because there's similarities in that, and I can definitely speak to that going to a unity church where we say in unity, you know, we're still Christian and, you know, we're down with Jesus, but you still have a lot of elements, you know, they do where it's very Buddhist-like. So I'm just curious from like your perspective and your work, have you seen that kind of like, I'm here, but I'm curious about over here, or I'm looking to just break free from it all and I just want to learn and grow from that, you know, from those perspectives, maybe tapping into each of the faith traditions and, you know, their philosophies for my spiritual growth.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was all part of why I chose the name Faith Seeker Kids for my business. So in many ways, faith leaders from each tradition, you know, you have rabbis and you have Buddhist teachers, and ministers, and all of those people are really, to a certain extent, faith keepers. They are experts at how to live into that particular faith tradition, which is great. And that particular faith tradition worked for them, still works for them. But for a lot of people who are sort of sitting in the pews, so to speak, you know, it's a lot to figure out, right? Who and what God is, and how you're going to incorporate the divine into your life. And so I think we have reached a point in time where we need to be able to say, if the faith tradition in which you were raised isn't quite working for you, either the belief system or the rituals, then can we find something that will work for you? And maybe that's taken from another tradition. Sometimes, for example, you know, a lot of young people decided, as you pointed out, to get into Buddhism, right? Oh, I like to meditate. Oh, I like to meditate. Well, it turns out that contemplative prayer has been part of the Christian tradition for hundreds of years. So sometimes beliefs and practices that we think are really different or outside of our assigned faith tradition really aren't as different as we might think they are. So, and as we all know, the numbers of young people who are identifying with a single particular religion, the percentage of those folks is going down, right? So unfortunately, what happens too often is that young people then end up being sort of nothing, right? And I think what this is here to say, what my work says is, you know, there's actually a lot of ways to articulate who and what the divine is about. There's a lot of ways to tap into that, and maybe some of those ways would be interesting to you. Maybe some of those ways would work for you. And so I think that that's why some of our materials that are geared towards middle school kids actually work for young adults who are going through this process themselves.
Okay. And I saw on your website that you mentioned like community service projects. How can you explain about that with the working with your
Well, so one of the things that all religious traditions have in common, you know, a lot of people know that the golden rule appears in every different religious tradition, but there are a whole bunch of other things that appear in most religious traditions as well, right? Being honest, being respectful, the notion of hospitality, simply just being kind. And one of the things that shows up is taking care of those in need, right? And so community service is one of the ways that you, just by doing community service, you are doing something that happens in all faith traditions. And so in the curriculum, we definitely include community service ideas. And some of them are just, you know, general community service ideas, and some of them go well with certain lesson plans. And so it's not, people always say, oh, kids should do community service. But what we found in our program is it's not always so easy to find community service opportunities for 6-year-olds. So they can do some things for sure. But we've actually spent many years identifying and developing community service opportunities for young children. And so I wanted to be able to share that as well with people.
Cool. Nice. Do you have I'm also curious, do you have a vision to see where Faith Seeker Kids will be going in the next 5-10 years? The whole process of its evolution?
Yeah, I have lots and lots of ideas. So I'm hoping I have more curriculum units that I could publish. So I published the Peace unit. We also have Compassion, Embracing the Darkness, which looks at fear and pride and greed. Almost all religious traditions deal with those, what we normally think of as negative emotions. And so instead, what we try to do is treat, everyone has those emotions, right? You can't get rid of them, so how do we live with those emotions? We also have, there's creation stories from all over the world. So there's other curriculum units that we could publish. And I'm hoping that the Sacred Spaces book will be the first in a series. So we're also looking at, we all eat festive foods, we all read special books, we all love lights, and so there are several other small books like that. My current project is we are taking the peace stories from the curriculum and we are putting them together in a single bedtime storybook for kids. It's going to be called Embracing Peace. Stories from the world's faith traditions. And so I'm working with illustrators right now. We're getting illustrations for all the stories, and that should be out hopefully in early 2021.
Nice. Nice. Well,
yeah,
congratulations.
so we'll just keep going. We'll just keep doing our thing and trying to convince people that this is important work.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Now, in the times where you have time to yourself, what do you do for fun? You know, what do you enjoy doing outside of your interfaith work?
Right,
And like interfaith work is your life. Unless you're like me, your interfaith work is your life.
So honestly, one of the most fun things I do is I get to be a mom to my two great kids. So my son is 14, so he's currently doing virtual high school. My daughter is 20, so she moved out of the house. And so, of course, they don't need the same kind of parenting that they used to need. But my kids are great, right? They're smart and they're funny and they're interesting young people, and I learn a ton from them. And so that's obviously a big part of what I do in my spare time. But I've also been working out a lot, especially since we're all stuck at home, right? So I've been doing a lot of online yoga classes. And I also do Taekwondo. I started Taekwondo with my son, and then he quit doing it, and I just sort of kept doing it. So my dojang is doing online classes as well. So at the very least, I'm trying to sort of stay fit during these crazy times.
Well, it's good you have a consistent regimen. I'm still working on something like to do consistently.
Yeah, I try to be consistent, so.
Yeah, mine is now like 3 days a week.
Yeah, right.
And before we go, can you let our audience know how they can purchase your books and how can they stay in touch with you?
Yeah, thank you. So we all have Sacred Spaces, came out on Amazon, so that's the easiest way to purchase that. The 4 volumes of the Peace Unit of the curriculum, Interfaith Made Easy, those are sold through my publisher, possibilitiespublishing.com/shop. And so we have those available in both print editions and downloadable. And then I do all the regular social media stuff. So I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram as Faith Seeker Kids. I also curate here in Asheville, the Asheville Interfaith Facebook group, which is a public group. So that has almost 300 members now. And across all those platforms, I do slightly different things, but basically the idea is to let people know when it's a holy day in one of the major world traditions. I post crafts, I post activities, I post kids' book ideas. If right now a lot of interfaith groups are doing things online, Creation Spirituality Communities has an interfaith service every Sunday night. United Religions Initiative is doing various programming, Religions for Peace. And so I try to post links to those online either seminars or rituals or other opportunities. So yeah, I love to stay in touch with people. I love to hear what works and what doesn't work. One of the things I found is that educators are incredibly creative. So they can do things with these books and with the curriculum that I never would have anticipated. So it's always fun to hear how people are actually using these resources, because people come up with all kinds of interesting ways to do that.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah, this is much appreciative. I'm sure the audience will definitely appreciate the information that you have available for them to use. So yeah, thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Oh, sure. You're welcome. And thank you, our Interfaith Connections audience, for joining us today. Make sure that you subscribe to our channel and that you like this video, and definitely get in touch with Vicki with her products. It's very important to know this stuff, particularly in this day and age. And I think religious literacy is the key to a lot of things that we're trying to strive for towards peace and understanding in our world.